All right, so we move on to the second book called Nehemiah. So Ezra is the priest who will create the Bible. Nehemiah is the governor sent by the Persians to reestablish the Jewish nation. Okay, so can you read the highlighted part?
At the time, I was cupbearer to the king.
Okay, cupbearer to the king is like a really powerful position, right? Because you can poison the king. So the king loves you. The king sees you as someone who is very competent, and you could possibly be one day be prime minister or the first minister. Okay, keep on going.
In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King
Artaxerxes.
Artaxerxes, my bad. When wine was served him, I carried the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had never been sad in this presence before. So the king said to me, "Why is your face sad, since you are not sick? This can only be sadness of the heart." Then I was very much afraid. I said to the king, "May the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my ancestors' graves, lies waste, and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" Then the king said to me, "What do you request?" So I prayed to the God of heaven. Then I said to the king, "If it pleases the king and your servant has found favor with you, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my ancestors' graves, so that I may rebuild it." The king said to me, the queen also was sitting beside him, "How long will you be gone, and when will you return?" So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a date. Then I said to the king, "If I pleases the king, let letters be given me to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may grant me passage until I arrived in Judah, and a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, directing him to give me timber to make beams for the gates of the temple fortress, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall occupy." And the king granted me what I asked, for the gracious hand of my God was upon me.
Okay, so the Bible says that Nehemiah one day feels tremendous regret that the city of his ancestors has not been rebuilt. Okay, and he begs the king for permission to go back. Guys, this is not how empires work. Okay, this is not how empires work. You do not ask the king or the emperor for anything because he will just cut your head off. Okay. How empires work is that you have to read the king's intentions, right? You have to figure out, what does he really want? And then you have to say, "Please, please, I want to do this. Not because you asked me to do this, but because I want to do this myself, okay? And I will work hard to achieve this ambition." That's how empires work, all right? The king does not tell you what he wants. You have to guess what he wants. If you can guess what he wants, then you get promoted. If you can't guess what he wants, then you get your head cut off, right? That's how empires work. This is important because when we move on to the nation of Israel, most people believe that the nation of Israel started with the Zionist movement, which came with the writing of a book called Judenland, Fatherland, written by this German Jewish journalist called Theodor Herzl. And so people say Zionism started 100 years ago. Guys, when we do the next state of Israel, we will discover that it's actually part of the British Imperial policy. Okay? But the British themselves cannot be seen as the ones who are promoting the creation of the state of Israel, because it makes them look bad. Okay? Because everyone else would be like, "Why are you doing this?" Okay? So what they have to do is create a situation in which the Jews themselves want to create their own nation. The problem, though, is, this is really important, and we'll discuss this later, is that 100 years ago, guess what? Jews did not want to go to Jerusalem because they were happy where they were. Okay? There were a lot of Jews who were pretty happy in Babylon, but they were sent back in order to create this province, Judah, and to create all this conflict with the locals. Okay? That's how empires work. Okay. All right. So when Nehemiah goes back, what he's going to do is he's going to build the temple, and he's going to build the walls. This is going to piss everyone off, right? Because, like, why would you do that? We're all living happily together. We're all one big family. And now you're building these walls, which means that you're better than us, or you're afraid of us, or you want to conquer us, okay? So this creates all these conflicts with the locals, which is, again, what the Persian Empire wants to happen. This is how empires work. All right. Okay, can you read?
Now there was a great outcry of the people and of their wives against their Jewish kin. For there were those who said, "With our sons and our daughters, we are many. We must get grain so that we may eat and stay alive." There were also those who said, "We are having to pledge our fields, our vineyards, and our houses in order to get grain during the famine." And there were those who said, "We are having to borrow money on our fields and vineyards to pay the king's tax." Now our flesh is the same as that of our kindred. Our children are the same as their children, and yet we are forcing our sons and daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have been ravished. We are powerless, and our fields and vineyards now belong to others.
Okay, so what's happening is that Nehemiah has gone back to create this new province of Jews. What he's discovering is that there's massive corruption and inequality among these Jews. And it's a problem because they're a minority in a very hostile region, right? Keep on going.
I was very angry when I heard their outcry and these complaints. After thinking it over, I brought charges against the nobles and the officials. I said to them, "You are all taking interest from your own people." And I called a great assembly to deal with them. And said to them, "As far as we were able, we have brought back our Jewish kindred who had been sold to other nations, but now you are selling your own kin, who must then be brought back by us." They were silent and could not find a word to say. So I said, the thing that you are doing is not good. Should you not walk in the fear of our God to prevent the taunts of the nations, our enemies? Moreover, I and my brothers and my servants are lending them money and grain. Let us stop this taking of interest. Restore to them this very day their fields, their vineyards, their olive orchards, and their houses, and their interests on money, grain, wine, and oil that you have been exacting from them. Then they said, "We will restore everything and demand nothing more from them. We will do as you say." And I called the priests and made them take an oath to do as they had promised. I also shook out the folds of my garment and said, "So many God shakes out everyone from house and from property who does not perform this promise. Thus may they be shaken out and emptied." And all the assembly said, "Amen," and praised the Lord. And the people did as they had promised.
Okay, so this is a really important aspect of the Jews that people don't really understand how unified they are, okay? An example is that if you're a Jewish person, you can always get an interest-free loan if you want to buy a house or start a business. Okay, that's pretty amazing, right? If we want to buy a house or want to start a business, we go to the bank, they're like, okay, we're going to charge you 10% interest, and maybe you can't afford that, right? But if you're a Jewish person, doesn't matter how poor you are, there will always be Jewish organizations that can offer you interest-free loans if you want to start a business, or if you want to buy a house, if you want to do anything. Because Jews are not allowed to collect interest from each other. That's how unified they are as a people. Okay? So just read the top and then highlight it and that's it, okay?
Okay. When the 7th month came, the people of Israel being settled in their towns, all the people gathered together into the square before the water gate. They told the scribe Ezra to bring the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had given to Israel. Accordingly, the priest Ezra brought the law before the assembly, both men and women, and all who could hear with understanding. This was on the first day of the 7th month. He read from it facing the square before the water gate, from early morning until midday, in the presence of the men and women and those who could understand, and the ears of all the people were attentive to the book of the law.
Okay, so this is the last step of creating the Jewish identity, okay? So the idea of the Jewish identity is that they follow the laws of God, they do not marry outside their religion. They don't charge each other interest. They don't exploit each other. Okay? And the last thing is this. The last thing is that their historical memory is the Bible. Okay? Who are we as Jewish people? What are our memories? It's whatever's written in the Bible. Okay? So Ezra is taking all these historical documents and he's combining them together in what today we call the Bible. Okay? And this makes the Jewish people extremely resilient because no matter where they are, no matter how low the publishing goes, their memory, their historical identity is always stored in one Bible. That makes them the world's most resilient, flexible, and open people. Okay? So this begins the Bible. Okay? Keep on going.
In those days, I saw in Judah people treating wine presses on the Sabbath. And
Sabbath is a Saturday, the day of rest. Okay?
and bring in heaps of grain and loading them on donkeys, and also wine, grapes, figs, and all kinds of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I warned them at the time against selling food. Tyrians also, who lived in the city, brought in fish and all kinds of merchandise and sold them on the Sabbath to the people of Judah and in Jerusalem. Then I remonstrated with the nobles of Judah and said to them, "What is this evil thing that you are doing, profaning the Sabbath day? Did not your ancestors act in this way, and did not our God bring all this disaster on us and on the city? Yet you bring more worth on Israel by profaning the Sabbath." In those days also I saw Jews who had married women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab, and half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod, and they could not speak the language of Judah, but spoke the language of various people. And I contended with them, and cursed them, and beat some of them, and pulled out their hair. And I made them take an oath in the name of God, saying, "You shall not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters from your sons, or for yourselves." Did not King Solomon of Israel sin on account of such women? Among the many nations there was no king like him, and he was beloved by his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, foreign women made even him to sin. Shall we then listen to you and do all this great evil and act treacherously against our God by marrying foreign women?
Okay, so Nehemiah enforces two major laws. The first law is that you shall not work on the Sabbath because that is God's rest day, okay? Second major law is that if you marry a foreign woman, you must divorce her. He's bringing up families. Why? Because he believes that religious purity requires blood purity. If you marry a foreign woman, she's going to make you believe in their foreign god. Remember, it is by worshiping false idols. It's because of this that Yahweh decided to punish the Jews. Okay, so the Jews must only worship Yahweh. All right, so this is their interpretation of monotheism. So as you can see, there are certain traditions about the Jews that was created during the Persian Empire in order to facilitate Persia's control of the Levant. But these traditions, because they are encoded in the Bible, they stay with us even today. But not only that, but by reading the Bible carefully and understand how to connect the Bible to historical development, you can now figure out how Israel will develop over the next 10, 20 years, okay?